the Quad say they want to preserve peace in the Indo-Pacific region. How realistic is that with an emerging Chinese military superpower at the center of it all? I want to pull in Brad Bowman tonight. He's a former U.S. Black Hawk pilot. He's a former security advisor to the U.S. Senate. He's now with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C. Brad, it's good to see you again. Let's talk about what today means. It marks 3 months since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There are no signs that this war will end anytime soon. Are there lessons to be learned, especially for the Quad group of nations?
Thanks for the opportunity to join you, and thanks for the question. My answer to your good question is absolutely yes. I think the number one lesson that the Quad, but our European friends as well, and democracies around the world should learn is that we should spend a heck of a lot less time worrying about provoking authoritarian aggressors and bullies and more time helping beleaguered democracies before the invasion starts. You know, look at 2021, right? The U.S., I have good reason to believe, had indications and warnings that Putin was planning some sort of large-scale invasion early in 2021. Secretary Blinken was publicly warning of this in November, and yet we were still wringing our hands about, we better not arm Ukraine because we might provoke Putin. And he was probably pocketing that and saying, thank you very much, and proceeding with his plans. And we see many of those same concerns playing out with Taiwan. We don't want to provoke Beijing, so we better not provide them the means to defend their freedom. And so to me, that's the number one lesson. And this is relevant because as we speak, there's a $14 billion backlog or more in weapons, American weapons for Taiwan that are yet to be delivered, and time is of the essence.
Yeah, I want to ask about Taiwan in just a moment, but I want to stick with the Quad for a moment here. India has refused to condemn Russia for its attack on Ukraine. I mean, can we talk then about there being any shared values when we talk about this Quad group when you've got India, not saying anything because it likes to get cheap Russian oil?
You know, the Quad reminds me a bit of a family, right? In a family, you have more that unites you than divides you, hopefully, in most families. And I'd say that's true of the Quad. I mean, if you look at the joint statement put out by all our 4 leaders, it talked about a shared commitment to the rule of law, territorial integrity, national sovereignty, not threatening the use of force. Those are very important things if you look at Chinese activities in the South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, Hong Kong, elsewhere. But, in a family, there's some areas where you disagree. And India does have its history of not being non-aligned. It has a deep security relationship with Russia. And I, for one, think New Delhi's behavior has been a little disappointing. But for the long term, if our children or grandchildren confront a world where we don't face Chinese aggression, serious Chinese aggression that could have far-reaching consequences, we need the democracies of the world to be more unified and capable as possible, complicating the life for Chinese military planners so that they decide not to conduct the aggression in the first place.
Brad, what did you make of U.S. President Biden's comments this week regarding the use of force if China were to attack Taiwan? And I'm wondering, was his message one that Beijing needed to hear?
It's a great question. I think there's clearly a growing bipartisan momentum in the United States for doing more to help Taiwan, being more assertive in trying to deter Chinese aggression as the balance of the power in the Taiwan Strait tips increasingly in Beijing's advantage. And I think you're hearing Biden's mind, heart, and soul saying, heck yes, we're going to help Taiwan. But, that is a little inconsistent or quite inconsistent with longstanding U.S. policy, the Taiwan Relations Act, and our doctrine of strategic ambiguity. And yet again, we saw his staff trying to walk that back. So I'd say that the White House needs to kind of tighten up its operation a little bit. This is not helpful confusion. When the president speaks, that's kind of policy. And so I think National Security Advisor Sullivan needs to tighten up operations there a little bit, to be honest with you.
But, I mean, he was saying, the U.S. president was saying, what he was thinking, right? And that if Taiwan were to be attacked by China, the U.S. military would intervene. And, to your point, he wasn't worried about ruffling the feathers in Beijing, was he?
No, he wasn't. And frankly, I've been a voice saying we should be doing more, help more to Taiwan. But let's just be clear that the U.S. policy has been We don't want Taiwan to declare independence, but we also want to deter Chinese aggression, and we want to provide Taiwan the means to defend itself. This is the balancing act we've been trying to strike for decades. Some would argue, many are arguing here in the U.S., it's time to set aside that strategic ambiguity and make a clear commitment that we would come to Taiwan's defense, because the threat seems to be growing by the day.
And Brandon, before we run out of time, I want to ask you, what would happen if China were to invade Taiwan? I mean, would this be a war that the U.S. would be able to win?
Wow, we need more than 30 seconds for that one, but I would just tell your viewers that this could take many forms, right? It could take a blockade, it could take a cyber attack, it could be hybrid warfare, it could be many things other than People's Liberation Army soldiers coming ashore in Taiwan. But we need to make Taiwan a porcupine, and that means missiles and other type capabilities, more missiles, fewer M1 tanks, and the list goes on. But that's some of the things we need to be focused on now, before the invasion occurs, not after.